This is the Neoliberal Around podcast.
So, welcome to Caribbean Thought. We're going to continue from the last lecture. I'm actually going to share my screen. Hold up. Is this it? I'm going to share my screen. Where is the share again? I just saw it. Here we go. So last week we were going through the timeline of the Caribbean, and I think we stopped at Dutty Boukman. We stopped at 1760s to 1780. Dutty Boukman was brought from Senegambia to Jamaica. Dutty Boukman escaped to Haiti, became a Vodou priest, helped organize the first major revolt of the Haitian Revolution on August 14th, 1791 at Boy Cane Man. He was killed later that year. 1746 to 1791, Dutty Boukman, knowledgeable in Islam, Obeah, and Vodou, represented the highly spiritual and dynamic religious systems Africans brought with them to the Caribbean. His influence helped inspire the Haitian Revolution and leaders such as Toussaint Louverture. The Haitian Revolution was 1740 to 1791, 1791, 1804. The Haitian Revolution resulted in the defeat of the French and the establishment of Haiti as the first Black republic in 1804. In a sense, I mean, you question, is Haiti truly free? Because Haiti is still going through turmoil and tension. I think Haitians are prideful people. And right now, because of what they've had to deal with in terms of penetration from various countries, interference from various countries, from France, trying to and the rest of the world not recognizing their independence in 1804, and them trying to be integrated into the Western system or into the world, and the fact that they want to be integrated in the world because no man is an island, no man stands alone. Okay, we are part of a system, a world system, and however they were not included in the world system until French wanted them to pay an indemnity, which is in 1825 they levied an indemnity against them. They have to pay it. They didn't pay it off until 1960s, which kept them in debt. The Haitian Revolution resulted in the defeat of France, and then of course later on we find that we said that Haiti is ruled by a gang of 5 or 4: Brazil, France, Spain, Brazil, France, Spain, the U.S., all part of the the leadership of Haiti today, and they've gone through several assassinations. There are those people within the leaders within the country have also not made it easy, because they have also aligned themselves with external forces that has served to undermine the independence and their freedom. 1804, Africans in Haiti defeated the French. We said that already. And I made the point here that Dessalines, Boukman were recognized by many as heroes of the revolution, while Europeans often elevated Toussaint Louverture as the acceptable face of the revolution. Toussaint Louverture was a military-trained, mixed gentleman. 1807, the British Parliament abolished the transatlantic slave trade. In 1807, British Parliament abolished not slavery. In 1807, the British Parliament, they didn't abolish slavery. What they abolished was the slave trade. So if you had slaves, that's fine. But the transatlantic slave trade, okay, was abolished in 1807, which includes, and the slave trade, the transatlantic slave trade. You notice the word trade. It involves the acquisition of slaves for guns, and then for spices, and the route was a three-stop route. It's a triangular slave trade. The transatlantic was triangular in a sense: Africa, Europe, and then to the Americas. That was abolished in 1807. 1833, the British Parliament passed the Slavery Abolition Act, legally abolishing slavery throughout most of the British Empire, including the British West Indies. Slavery wasn't abolished in the US in 1833. It was abolished, and slaves and black people weren't freed in 1833, but in the British Caribbean, they were freed in 1833. Of course, the people in the British Caribbean, particularly, and in Jamaica as well, they didn't know that they were free until 1865. So they didn't get the news that they were free until 1865. It doesn't take that long. It doesn't take 30 years, because we had the transatlantic slave trade. The transatlantic slave trade, trade between these countries didn't take 30 years in terms of trade between countries, the trade route. Traveling from Africa to Europe to the West Indies did not take 30 years. Okay? I did not. However, when the British slavery was abolished in 1833, but black people or African slaves did not. African slaves, or people who were enslaved, didn't know until 1865. They worked and gave free labor, and they were never paid after they got the news. In February 27, 1844, we had the first Dominican Republic independence. That's I would have probably asked you, what do you notice about the timeline as it relates to Dominican Republic? Of course, one of the things we notice is that, well, okay, I can probably ask you that, but February 27, 1844 was the first Dominican Republic independence. After Haitian rule over Eastern Hispaniola from 1822 to 1844, Haitian rule over Eastern Hispaniola from 1822 to 1844. Dominican nationalists such as Juan Pablo Duarte, Francisco del Rosario, Sanchez, and Matias Ramon Maya declared independence from Haiti in 1844. But of course, in 1821, the experiment started. In 1821, I don't have it on here, but when the lecture next week will zero in on that. It actually started 1821. There was an experiment and then in 1822, 1822 we had the Haitians marching into Dominican Republic. That was in 1822. If I could find that information here. But 1822, that was when the Haitians helped to secure total severance from Europe. Haitian President Jean-Pierre Boyer, on February 9, 1822, Haitian President Jean-Pierre Boyer entered Santo Domingo, and ended slavery and unified the islands of Hispaniola. They unified the island of Hispaniola because Haiti was under French rule, while DR on the other side, the western side, was under Spanish rule. Their independence in 1804, in a sense, affected and the revolt affected and influenced and inspired the western side of Hispaniola as well. And of course, 1821, they tried to, they had an experiment with independence, but it wasn't until 1822 that Haiti marched in and unified. Oh, by the way, and this is it, it's on December 1, 1821, Jose Nunez declared independence from Spain in 1821 and named the new state Spanish Haiti. And that's a spillover from the Haitian Revolution, because the revolution in 1804 inspired many people from the western side of Hispaniola. And they continued to press for freedom. And by 1821 December, Jose Nunes declared it independent. But it wasn't really until 1822 that Jean-Pierre unified the island and made it completely freed from, because the Spanish, they declared it was declared in the western side was declared independent, declared independence from Spain, but they still had remnants of Spanish influence. And of course, so it's not until Jean-Pierre, the Haitian president, marched in on 1822 that they had complete independence. That's not on your timeline, which I think I should update your timeline to have December 1, 1821, Spanish Haiti. You have the invention of Spanish Haiti, and 1822, you had this February 9, 1822, President Jean-Pierre Boyer entered Santo Domingo. That's missing from the timeline. I'm going to include that in the timeline. I'm going to update it. Probably I can update it now. So I should have, 1821, Nunes declared independence. Nunes declared Western Hispaniola independent of Spain. I should have said that. And then, of course, 1822, Jean-Pierre Boyer unified Hispaniola after entering Santo Domingo and ended slavery. So although Nunes declared Western Hispaniola independent of Spain, they were independent of Spain, but they still had the white people, or the Spanish people who lived on the western side of the island, still had slaves. Still, the western side was still under European influence, in the sense that the Europeans who dominated Western Hispaniola, they were independent of Spain, but they still controlled Spain. It's as if the US in 1776, when the US got independence from Britain, it was an independence. It's an independence from European control, from Britain, but the white people, Europeans who lived here here, who still controlled, had slaves. So slavery never ended. In 1821, slavery never ended. And that's a very important distinction. In 1821, when Western Hispaniola declared independent from Spain, it was really the plantation owners and the white people and the plantocracy and the people who are from Spain who live there, the white people who live there, they were still Europeans. They just declared independent. They were separate and apart from Spain, but they still had slavery. It wasn't until 1822 when Jean-Pierre marched into Santo Domingo, where it meant a unification of Hispaniola And they ended slavery. So slavery ended completely, and white rule also ended in a sense. So it gave back power to the slaves and to the locals. So that's what 1822 represented, which is a very important distinction. I want you to know that. We recently celebrated July 4th in America, but some African Americans in America don't recognize and celebrate July 4th as independent, because when they got independence from America in 1776, some of the same black people even helped to fight the British. But when they got independence here in America, it was just an independence. It's just an independence from Britain. A revolution that led to independence from Britain, not independence of peoples in terms of black people. Slavery persisted. Slavery persisted. Discrimination persisted. Yes? So that's an important distinction to note. That's why some people celebrate Juneteenth. Africans celebrate Juneteenth as their independence, but they don't necessarily recognize July 4th in America. Now, 1833, we already talked about 1833. February 27, 1844, we already said that it was the first Dominican independence. Now, I don't think that was the first Dominican independence. I am going to say it was Dominican. I'm going to call it the second Dominican Republic independence. After Haitian rule over Eastern Hispaniola from 1822 to 1844, Dominican nationalists such as Juan Pablo Duarte, Francisco del Rosario, Sanchez, and so on declared independence from Haiti with the help of many people celebrate February 27 as the true independence of Haiti. The true independence because they were free from Haitian rule, but it's really free from black rule, free from the locals' rule. It's in a sense, and they resort to the help of the Spanish. But I'm not going to call it the first Dominican Republic independence. I'm just going to call it Dominican Republic independence. If I ask you this question in the exam, I don't even, it's fine, because there is some kind of discrimination here. They don't recognize the fact that all of Haiti, all of Hispaniola was free, okay? Free from European influence. February 27, 1844, Dominican nationalists such as Juan Pablo Duarte, he sought the help of the Spanish to help with overthrowing and getting rid of the Haitian, and even led to the point where massacred many Haitian and declared Dominican Republic an anti-white country, anti-black country. He didn't want to have anything to do with black people, anything to do with Africans. And if any Haitian or any black people living in DR recognized as themselves as Haitian, or they are immediately persecuted. Many Haitians or people, Hispaniola, who were black or whatever, many of them were displaced or killed. In a sense, they whitewashed the country, in a sense. That's why, some people in Dominican Republic, you ask them their race. There's a difference between race and ethnicity. What's your race? What's your ethnicity? You're Hispanic or Latino. What's your race? They're still Hispanic or Latino. They don't embrace or see themselves as black or African, of African descent. They have completely wiped that from their history. Anyways, 1848. But many people I'm going to talk about that in next week's class, because I asked the question: should Dominican independence history begin with the abolition of slavery? and the end of Spanish rule? I'm going to ask that question. In fact, next week, what is the key question is Dominican independence a single event, or is it a continuing struggle against colonialism, slavery, racism, dictatorship, and imperial power? Um, um, Managed in officially the independence, Dominican independence is February 27, 1844. Officially. Okay, so I'm going to put the official, because I don't want to confuse you guys. The official Dominican Republic independence is, yes, 8 February, but there's something happening there. We'll talk about that next week. Of course, 1848 abolition of slavery in the French Caribbean colonies. So 1833 abolition of slavery in the British Caribbean. 1848 abolition of slavery in the French Caribbean colonies. Of course, in Hispaniola, slavery was abolished from when Haiti revolted and got independence. And then they extended that to the western side of Hispaniola called Santo Domingo or Dominican Republic, but Dominican Republic today. So 1850s, Great Revivalism and Jamaican Revivalism emerged as a major spiritual movement emphasizing African retentions, spirit possessions, renewal, and resistance. That's in the 1850s. That's where you have Pocomania and the revival tradition. And Obia is not a faith. It's a practice, just so you know. We'll talk a little bit of, I don't know if Reverend Richard Beckwood is going to talk a little bit about that, but if he doesn't talk about that, I'll talk about it at the penultimate lecture when I ask the question, should theology transcend culture? November 6, 1865, the Second Dominican Republic independence. Oh, there we go. Okay. Second. Oh, I see why I have first and second. Second Dominican Republic independence. Following the annexation by Spain in 1861, Dominican nationalists led by Gregorio Luperon fought the Restoration War and successfully restored Dominican sovereignty in 1865. Okay? Because, in 1844, the overthrow, Juan Pablo Duarte, who is an opportunist, he's a local, he's from Santo Domingo himself, a local, but they were greedy for power, and so he went and sought the help of the Spanish to overthrow the Haitians to take back, and so they were independent of Haiti, but in a sense, Spanish influence started again. Okay, in order to get their help, they opened up their country again to Spanish influence, so that by 1865, we're talking about another independence. So following the annexation by Spain in 1861, Dominican nationalists led by Gregorio Luperon fought the Restoration War and restored Dominican sovereignty in 1865. 1865 also marked the official notification of emancipation reached part of the British West Indies. So I talked about this already. By 1865, the slaves are just learning of their freedom. They weren't paid when they learned. They gave 30 years of free labor and they left the plantation. Now, when they left the plantation in 1865, what you have was the coming of the Chinese as indentured laborers. Okay? From the 1855, I say, to about from the 1855 up to the late 1800s, you have the coming of the Chinese and Indians as indentured laborers to replace the loss of labor as slavery was abolished and the African slaves left the plantation. Okay, that's how you have Chinese. Many people are asking, where you get? How come we have the Chinese? The Chinese and the Indians came as a result to replace the gap. So I think that was what between 1833 when slavery was abolished to about 1865. What you have was a negotiation between Europe and the Chinese and the Indians to bring indentured laborers to the Caribbean um, to work the plantation. Um, 1873, abolition of slavery in Puerto Rico and the Spanish Caribbean. The late 1800s, Jewish communities migrated to various Caribbean territories. Formerly enslaved Africans entered wage labor systems under colonial economies. Of course, so Jewish communities migrated to various Caribbean territories. And the Jews are very powerful families in the Caribbean and in Jamaica, especially in Jamaica and so on. They are very powerful. They're powerful everywhere. They control a lot of industries. Um, uh, they live in the best houses. And anyways, in early 1900s, you have the anti-imperialist movements emerged through the Caribbean alongside debates surrounding Marxism, socialism, capitalism, and nationalism. That's from the early 1900s. Again, that's the anti-imperialist movements emerged through the Caribbean alongside debates surrounding Marxism, socialism, capitalism, and nationalism. Those are political systems. They have Marxist ideology. Especially Karl Marx wrote his book Das Kapital, that looks at how capitalism represents theft, and Marxism and socialism. There's a slight different, not much difference between the two, just slight differences that promotes communism. Marxism and socialism, or Marxism promotes communism, where factors of production aren't owned by a few people, but it's shared throughout the community. Many people associate totalitarianism and dictatorship with Marxism. That's not true. There are people who try to practice Marxist communism, like Stalin and so on, but they ended up creating a totalitarian form of government. That is not Marxism. Okay. So just so you know, Marxism is not totalitarianism. But anyways, the rise of Marxism, socialism, capitalism, nationalism, anti-imperialist movement emerged through the Caribbean alongside debates surrounding these. That's early 1900. 1914 to 1918, Caribbean soldiers fought in World War I under the British Empire. Just so you know, Caribbean soldiers fought. 1930s, the emergence of Rastafari in Jamaica as a religious, political, spiritual, and anti-colonial government. So Rastafarianism started in the 1930s in Jamaica. And that's where Rastafarianism started in Jamaica and eventually spread throughout the world. It's a reaction of, with the rise of this anti-imperialist kind of movement, where people are moving away from capitalism. Some people were turning to Marxism, but people in the Caribbean was turning to Rastafarianism, their own form of government, or religion and ideology. And Rastafari is a kind of ideology as well. That's where you have Bob Marley said that we're not capitalists or Marxists. We are the I and I. Okay, the I and I. Okay, it's all about the I and I. But the 1930s was the Great Depression happened in 1930s in Europe and in the world, and that's where many people was the poverty and a lot of people were depressed. in terms of economically. You know, that's where in the US and in many of these European countries which had colonies, they started social welfare, but social welfare didn't extend to the Caribbean. 1930s to the present, the emergence and growth of calypso, soca, reggae, dancehall as expression of Caribbean identity, resistance, and culture. 1939 to 1945. But I think reggae music really started to develop in the 1960s. 1939 to 1945, Caribbean people contributed significantly to the Allied forces during the World War II. So Caribbean people fought in World War I and World War II. Okay. 1945, the formation of the United Nations and the emergence of a Western-dominated global order through institutions such as the IMF, the World Bank. Discussions intensified regarding Israel and Palestine within a broader geopolitical struggle over the Middle East as well, because the Western world never had any presence in the Middle East, so it was prudent for them to go back to Israel, to go back to the Middle East, and to reinvigorate and reinvent Israel's presence. I mean, their justification for displacing the people that were there that was living in Palestine, in the Gaza, displacing them, to the death, displacing them. In fact, they went in with troops. They killed many people to reestablish Israel. The justification, and of course, many Jews from Europe went back to the Middle East. Of course, there's a guy from who we had a class who talks about the real Israelites are really Black people from the Caribbean. I'm going to share that video with you one day. He came to the class and he taught the class. Some people think that, and I don't want to be seen as anti-Semitic, but I'm telling you the arguments that's out there saying that it was justifiable for the Western world to extend their order, their control and Western order to the Middle East because there was no presence there. And so what they did was to use a historical argument about Israel to reestablish their fortify the area there. But 1948, the University of West Indies was established. 1950s, the global rise of reggae music from Jamaica reshaped world music and Black consciousness. 1950s, the rise of reggae. Sorry, the 1950s. I said 1965. Sorry, the 1960s, the rise of reggae music. 1950s to present, waves of migration intensified, contributing to the Caribbean diaspora. In the 1950s, you had a lot of people migrating from the Caribbean to Europe. A lot of Jamaicans migrated to the UK, bringing their music and their culture. You have a large Jamaican population in the UK. In fact, I think almost all my mom's siblings moved to the UK. My grandmother on my mom's side, had 6 or 7 kids, or 7 or 8 kids, and only 2 or 3 remained in Jamaica. All of them migrated to the UK. And there's a lot, when you have that in the 1950s, a lot of migration. A lot of people migrated to the UK. And right now, and in a sense, over time, you find that even in the UK, they've adopted a lot of the Jamaican culture, a lot of the how Jamaicans, you watch some UK movies, some shows, you have that accent, that slang that they speak, or the Black culture there is really influenced by Jamaicans in that region. 1957, the expansion of the bauxite industry in Jamaica. Of course, they really found bauxite in the 1950s in Jamaica. And that's when Jamaica really started to rise too. And they thought that Jamaica would be the pearl of the Caribbean. In fact, Jamaica was seen as the pearl of the Caribbean because they were rivaling Singapore. Singapore is a very wealthy country, and they had GDP. Jamaica had GDP that was the gross domestic product per year was 5.7%. Jamaica was growing, was developing. There's economic growth is different from economic development. Economic development is speaks about infrastructural growth, growing the infrastructure so that you can grow, because infrastructure helps to grow the country. Okay, infrastructure grows the country. So when people talk about economic development or development, in other words, you're building, you're equipping your capabilities, you're developing your capabilities in order to facilitate growth. Yes. So our capabilities was growing in a sense, and the gross domestic product, Jamaica was growing at one was growing rapidly. And what happened by the 19 by that's what, well, we'll talk about that later on. I mean, if you read the book, we talked about what happened that caused Jamaica to derail. If you watch the film Life and Death, they talk about that a little bit. The IMF, the World Bank. Of course, Jamaica squandered some of their windfall profits, so they were spending too much money on social welfare, or they were spending too much money. They were utilizing all of their windfall profits, but however, they weren't using it in a very strategically. So that by the 1970s, when we needed those windfall profits that we had garnered in the 1950s, they were eviscerated. We never had them to push us into the 70s and the 80s. There was a lot of mismanagement that took place. So I believe, why is it that we had to go to the IMF? Why is it that we find 1970s happen, where they cut oil production, which means the cost of oil rose, and because Jamaica, and because we're so heavily dependent on energy and so on, we don't have the funds, the wherewithal in order to purchase the oil and to bring the oil. So we have to be borrowing money to supply the energy sector. What happened? Why is it that we had to go to the IMF if in the 1950s and 60s we were growing at such an alarming rate? Jamaica was doing so well and seen as the part of the Caribbean. Why? Okay. Of course, one of the arguments is that we squandered the money, mismanagement. Yes. So fine, we blame the IMF and the World Bank, but some of the blame is also should be leveled at the leaders, the feet of some of our leaders, because they didn't use the money prudently to develop Jamaica economically. 1958 to 1962, the West Indies Federation attempted regional political unity, but ultimately collapsed. So 1958 to 1962, there was a discussion about forming a West Indies Federation between several countries in the Caribbean. But of course, it failed. Many people believe that it failed because, again, the idea of national, that's why I'm telling you, nationalism can be good, but it can be bad in a sense, because people wanted to control their own, they wanted power. Everybody wanted their power. They wanted power. They want power, and so because they can't agree on where the center of control is going to be, they decide to sever, to get everybody, all these small islands getting their own independence. Yes, Hopton.
Good evening, Prof.
Yeah.
It is refreshing to hear you make the point that our leaders in Jamaica were a significant part of why we ended up with the financial challenges that we ended up with in the 70s, as they pondered to the need of a populace that was just coming out of slavery and didn't even understand what they needed, but the leaders brought corruption into the game.
Yes,
and squandered the money.
And by the way, one of the class that we will do maybe next week or week after next, if I have time, every semester I I do a lecture, I do a topic on corruption, and I play a video, and they talk about Jamaica's history with corruption, and it's not just Jamaica, the Caribbean history with corruption as well, and they talk about the HDI, the Corruption Perception Index, and corruption within the Black and brown countries and within throughout the Caribbean. Corruption in Jamaica, in Haiti and many Black and brown countries is high, and that has also defeated or any kind of prowess that we have. So I'm telling you, I interviewed somebody at the airport in Street Vibes, a program I do, and she talked about leaders are to be blamed. And one of the things I talk about, I talk about if the JLP and the PNP were able to come together, because when we got independence, what we need, I don't believe that we should have gotten independence with JLP and PNP. That is defeatist, you know. That has also served to derail our Caribbean unity, Caribbean independence, Caribbean prowess, but also corruption, greedy people. The West Indies Federation was established on the 3rd of January 1958 under the British Caribbean Federation Act of 1956, bringing together 10 British Caribbean territories: Antigua and Barbuda, Barbados, Dominica, Grenada, Jamaica, Montserrat, St. Kitts, Nevis, Anguilla, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, and the Grenadines, and Trinidad and Tobago, with British Guyana and British Honduras holding observer status. The capital was supposed to be Port of Spain. Trinidad and Tobago, in Trinidad and Tobago, the Federation aimed to create a political unit capable of gaining independence from Britain as a single state, similar to federation like Canada or Australia. That was the idea. But of course, as I said to you, there was internal political conflict, particular disagreement over governance, representation, and economic policies. Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago, the largest members, had tensions with smaller islands over resource allocation and political influence. These disputes, combined with geographic separation and insularity, led to the Federation's collapse in 1962, which is the 31st of May, 1962. And by August 1962, Jamaica got their own, they decided to get their own independence. Again, because there was political fighting between the countries in terms of, they couldn't agree on in terms of the center of government and how resources supposed to be shared, and which is kind of crazy that at this level we couldn't agree. It would have been so lovely to have all these countries be these 10 countries with Honduras and British Guyana coming together and having one country. Today we would have been one country. All of us would have been with one country. Oh my God, that would have been so beautiful. It feels good just thinking about it. Just thinking about the fact that we could have had one federation, one like that of Canada. But we couldn't agree. I mean, we just can't agree. But it's kind of crazy. But so it collapsed. So 1959, the Bandung spirit and the global non-aligned movements influenced Caribbean political consciousness and solidarity with Africa and Asia. 1959, the Cuban Revolution, led by Fidel Castro, reshaped Caribbean geopolitics and debates around socialism, imperialism, and development. I probably have to talk a little bit. I think anybody's doing Fidel Castro? Cuba. Hopefully, did I ask one of the groups to do Cuba? Anyways, 1959, Cuban Revolution led by Fidel Castro. He helped to preserve Cuba's independence from foreign occupation, and he set up the country in such a hardline way, so as to prevent penetration and influence from the outside, from the US or and the Spain, and they were chided for that. They were cut off from the Western world. They were cut off from trade, just like Ethiopia was in a sense, which led to the kind of political and economic situation that exists in those countries today. I mean, of course, Egypt is I mean, Ethiopia is different today. Ethiopia is now enshrined into the Western world and is doing well. I have friends who just moved to Ethiopia and they're doing well. 1960, Frank Wall became the first black captain of the West Indies cricket team in 1960. So um, West Indies never had a black captain, not until the 1960s. And Frank Wall was the first one. 1960s to 1980s, Caribbean nations achieved independence from colonial powers and experienced periods of optimism, nation building, and development amid the rise of neoliberal globalization. 1970s, the global oil crisis severely impacted Caribbean economies dependent on imports and tourism. That really helped to really derail Caribbean sovereignty and development and independence because now they have to go back to their former colonial masters, begging them for money. After they had a chance to come together, they couldn't agree. Everybody wanted their own governance, and of course they were making money and they squandered it. And of on social welfare, and of course by the 1970s, the oil crisis. They didn't prepare. They weren't fully prepared for crisis, and they weren't prepared for globalization. Okay, so so by the 1970s, when we had the oil crisis, where the oil producing countries decide to slash oil supply, which thereby driving up the cost of oil, which we are heavily dependent on oil for energy and almost everything. We had to be going and asking for money. And of course, those monies came with conditions. Yes. Which of course, and the rest is history. 1970s political rivalry intensified in Jamaica between Michael Manley and Edward Seaga amid Cold War tensions. And that's the next thing you have, Michael Manley and Edward Seaga. Michael Manley represented he was aligned with Fidel Castro and he was seen to be a socialist. There's a book that I have called The History of Democratic Socialism in Jamaica by Keith and Keith. I have the book here. Hopefully I can go over it a little bit. But Michael Manley, many people think that he wasn't really a democratic, so he wasn't really a socialist. He promoted and flirted with the idea of socialism, but he never really practiced socialism. Yet during that time, we had the interference from the US through the CIA and the FBI, and of course, Edward Seaga, who was friends. He was friends with Reagan and with the U.S. and they were trying to prop him up over. I mean, that was a big infighting. It really helped, almost devastated Jamaica. In a sense, it did. But was a significant time in Jamaica. This JLP versus PNP, or PNP versus JLP, Michael Manley, Edward Seaga, which in a sense continue to this day in terms of people's ideologies. The people are so tied to political tribalism or to political parties that they cannot hold their government accountable. They cannot see past the decisions that their governments are making. 1973, CARICOM, Caribbean Community, was established in 1973 to promote regional cooperation and integration. But although CARICOM came about in 1973, it didn't do anything to really help to provide any kind of economic aid and help. I'm telling you, sometimes I think, I apologize for saying this, CARICOM sometimes to me is just a big laughing stock. They just want to look cute. Okay. I mean, CARICOM has no power, has no teeth in a sense. Look what's going on with Haiti. They have not been able to provide any leadership with what's going on with Haiti. But look what's going on with Cuba. They have not provided any direction and leadership in terms of helping to protect against what's going on. Look what's going on with Venezuela. How have the CARICOM been able to come together to bring about the Caribbean leaders together in a way to help provide support to Venezuela and to negotiate their independence and so on and so forth. I mean, look what's going on in Cuba. How has Caribbean community, Cuba has served the Caribbean community, but the Caribbean community has not served Cuba. They just cannot come together. 1974, Maurice Bishop emerged as a socialist leader in Grenada. But Maurice Bishop led Grenada's socialist revolution before being overthrown and killed in 1983, followed by U.S. intervention by his own people, the People Revolutionary Army that he led. People in that same old group overthrew him because they were working secretly to undermine the efforts to secure their freedom and their economic independence. There were people on the ground were working with foreign operatives. That's okay. People believed that Edward Seaga or people think somebody was working with foreign operatives. Some people believe that Michael Manley was also working with foreign operatives. Yes, Houghton.
Afternoon again. One of the disadvantages or advantages I have is that of being around enough, not as an adult, but enough to remember. And you see the talk you keep making, Professor, about people.
Yeah.
The influence of the people, not just the leaders,
Yeah.
but the people who came out of slavery, and the demands that they placed, and the decisions that they enforced. Because to this date, Michael Manley has laid probably the greatest foundation plan for the success of Jamaica, despite his naivety and despite his unpreparedness to deal with what came out of the world oil crisis and the world changes. When he said that we should eat what we grow and grow what we eat, trying to develop our independence, it was the Jamaican people that rejected it. And to this day, any government that have any form of success in this country have a strong agricultural base. It depends a lot on that. Now we talk about tourism, but you see, we're moving tourism back. We're moving agriculture through tourism, and we're moving agriculture into our almost daily life. And almost, it is something funny. It is something funny to hear that almost every leader since Michael Manley that has won an election has looked at our independence through our food security.
Yes.
But the people, you keep talking about the people, and we can blame the leaders, but the weight of the influence of the people has kept back the Caribbean as well.
That is true. The people has also served to. Education also has served to undermine us. That's why it's okay for people not to have a kind of education. It's okay for people not to be exposed. Okay. But if the populace are educated and exposed to the realities of the world and the situation, probably they'll be able to make better decisions in terms of how they cooperate with what's going on the ground. Because Michael Manley talk about we eat what we go what we eat, but Michael Manley had an interesting vision. He wasn't all that bad, to that many people think that he was bad, but he had a good vision for the country. Maurice Bishop as well. But by the 1980s, structural adjustment programs imposed by the IMF and World Bank reshaped Caribbean economies through austerity, privatization, and dependency. 1980s to the present. Structural adjustment programs. Structural adjustment is a process really that helped to facilitate globalization, but in a sense, it didn't really help facilitate globalization. What it did was to denationalize nations to allow for penetration. Okay. That's what it did, really. The influx of multinationals and transnationals in the Caribbean, transferring decision making from the local to the globe to foreigners, selling off the beaches and industries. That has really helped serve to derail us because they want to pay. They have to pay back the IMF and the World Bank, so they have to sell off to pay back. The reasoning behind the massive privatizations of the late 80s and 90s was, yes, they had to sell off in order to get monies to pay off the IMF. And because that is what the IMF was demanding. Okay. 1980s, the Caribbean lost banana trade preference with the US and the UK, weakening their agricultural economies as well. They had Jamaica and the Caribbean countries, former colonies had, European colonies had a banana arrangement to export banana to Europe under a preferential agreement that was upended when the US created NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, led by Bill Clinton, and they were very strategic about that, because what they did was, of course, then after they created NAFTA, and of course Mexico was part of NAFTA, Canada was part of NAFTA, and the US. The Caribbean was not part of NAFTA. I've often advocated for an AFTA, okay, which includes the Caribbean, but at the time they had a NAFTA. And I think what should have happened with the Caribbean leaders and CARICOM was to try and press Bill Clinton, go to Bill Clinton, to the US, and see how the regional trade agreement between these three countries could be expanded to include the Caribbean. But the Caribbean was not part of that. And Mexico had a banana industry that they were growing and developing. And the industry was owned by some Canadians and Americans. And it was within their interest within NAFTA for Mexico banana industry to thrive and to do well, because it means they would make money. Okay. And so the competition that NAFTA faced in terms of their banana industry and the fact that they want to dominate the banana industry, Mexico where the Chiquita Banana Company, where bananas would come from in the NAFTA agreement. Caribbean had a very burgeoning and growing and competitive banana industry and market, and they wanted to dominate the banana market, but not where you have Caribbean countries have a preferential treatment with Europe, but they had a preferential treatment with Europe because Europe said, well, they just got independence. We want to provide them with the opportunities to grow and to develop. And so because we want to provide them with the opportunities to grow and to develop, we are going to give them a preferential treatment over the next couple of years so that they can grow and to develop. Once they get to a certain competitive level, then we can end the preferential treatment. NAFTA, Bill Clinton said no, went to WTO, the World Trade Organization, and complained that, they're practicing unfair competition. It's unfair. They shouldn't have and so they ended, WTO demanded that they end the preferential treatment, which was, I said the WTO really served the interest of the powerful countries, because the WTO didn't see that countries like the US was investing in their manufacturers, were subsidizing their manufacturers and their farmers. But at the same time, Caribbean countries were told that it is unfair for them to subsidize their farmers. And not only that, it's unfair for the IMF and the World Bank to also not expect Caribbean government to subsidize their farmers and their manufacturers if they are starting at a different level. How are they going to compete? How can you compete on a level playing field when Europe, the US, had already reached a certain level? They are thousands of years old. They have developed economically. The Caribbean is just coming into their own, but yet still they must play by the same rules. But yet at the same time, they are investing in their manufacturers, but the Caribbean can't subsidize their manufacturers and their farmers because, it's going to be, it's unfair competition. It's quite interesting. That is the facade of globalization. That's the facade of globalization. 1989, the fall of the USSR impacted Caribbean states with socialist alliance and economic ties. The fall of Russia, the fall of USSR, the split up of the Soviet countries, which includes so Russia, Mother Russia. There was all these countries were under Russian rule, not anymore. So Poland and Kazakhstan and Ukraine became nation states outside of any control from Moscow. Well, of course, what's happening today is that Moscow or Russia is trying to influence the former Soviet countries again to reassert their dominance and their control because they believe these other countries are becoming too powerful. Okay, 1990s, the intensification of globalization, transnationalism, and multinationalism, corporate influence in the Caribbean. P.J. Patterson in the 1990s. 1994, NAFTA affected Caribbean economies by restructuring
Yes, sir.
trade competition within we said that already in the 1994. Of course, the late 20th century to the present, corruption, crime, political violence, inequality, poverty remain persistent regional challenges in the Caribbean. 1998, Jamaica Theological Seminary was established. Wait, that's not right. No, actually, it became known as Jamaica Theological Seminary, but JTS didn't started. I think JTS is about over 40 years old. I don't think JTS started in 90. JTS was there was another name. JTS had another name, so I need to correct that. JTS did not start in 1998. I apologize, but the Jamaica Theological Seminary was established in 1998. There was another name. And I'll give it to you in a second. I don't know why I have that right there. I'll give you the information. 21st century, the Caribbean continue to wrestle with questions of identity, development, sovereignty, migration, faith, technology, sports, music, so on and so forth. Regional cooperation through organizations carry reflects growing awareness and independence. 2020, oil discoveries in Guyana raised questions about development, dependency, and so they discovered oil in Guyana. They always had oil, but they discovered oil in Guyana. But what happened in Guyana is that Guyana is not even wasn't making as much from oil because they're not they don't have capital intensive capabilities. What happened is that they had to go to the post-industrial countries like the US and get their people to come into and to get the oil, to extract the oil. And so what happened is that the cost is high, so they're only getting 12%. They're only getting 12% of the oil, while the US is making about 70% of the oil. That's crazy. 2021, Haitian President Jovenel Moïse was assassinated. Many believe that by his own people with the help of the CIA and foreign interference. 2022, the Jamaican government announced discussions regarding the repeal of colonial era obia. So in 2022, the Jamaican government announced open discussions as it relates to obia, obia yifo, because obia became illegal in 1882, so obia was made illegal by Britain in 1822. Just so you know. Hurricane, I think I'm gonna various hurricanes, earthquakes, blah blah blah. I think I'm gonna stop there for now. 1970 President Kevin continues to struggle with identity. It's the timeline of the Caribbean, and you guys have the timeline. Just take a look at it. We're gonna take a quick 5 minutes break. We'll come back at 8:26. When we come back, in the meantime, when we come back, I want you to spend some time to look at Caribbean. Yeah. Sorry? Hello? Who
Someone
that?
mic was open. They are speaking from their own personal business, sir.
Oh, okay. Right. So just so you know, this is, I don't know why I have this here. Jamaica Theological established in 1998. And I started at JTS in 1999. So I apologize. This is not right. I don't know why I have this here. I'm gonna take this out. I think they started, something happened in 1998 with JT, but JT started in 1960 by Zenas Gehrig. That was a major error on my part, so please excuse me. All right, so JT didn't start. JT started in 1960, one of the oldest theological seminaries in the Caribbean. Okay, so it's one of the oldest Caribbean seminaries in the Caribbean. Okay. Um, all right. We're gonna take a quick 5 minutes break. It's now 8:25 or 7:25 your time. We come back at 7:30. And when we come back at 7:30, I want you guys just to spend some time to peruse this other timeline that I have. It shows the countries and when they got their independence and so on from Haiti, DR, Puerto Rico, Jamaica, Trinidad, Barbados, Guyana, Bahamas, Grenada, Suriname, St. Vincent, Aruba, Puerto Rico. Um, okay. Puerto Rico, a referendum showed many Puerto Ricans dissatisfied with territory status, and they applied for independence, but most Puerto Ricans decided to stay with the U.S. Um, so we take a 5 minutes break here.